All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Gloria Wu, President of Opening Doors PTA. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to start with just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording tonight's meeting, so please stay muted to reduce background noise. After the presentation, we will have time for question and answer. If you have a question, please send to me via the chat, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. Now, this evening, we also have Dan DeGara, our superintendent, and Qingfei Hu, our assistant superintendent, here with us. I'm so appreciative of them for taking time to join us. Let me turn the time over to you, Dan. Would you like to say a few words to our families?
Absolutely. First off, I just want to extend a thank you to the Opening Doors PTA for facilitating tonight's event. It's nice to see so many families joining us this evening. A successful start to the 2021 school year is really important to us all. I'd like to acknowledge that we do have a few of our board trustees, I believe, joining the call this evening. Sam Leinbach, Amy Koo, and Jim Howard. I believe they're listening in on tonight's meeting. So I want to welcome them as well. And I just want to share, this summer has been full of ups and downs, and trying to figure out how we're going to start the school year. On behalf of the board, I just want to share that our commitment is to move forward with teaching and learning in the best ways that we know possible, given our circumstances and our conditions. So we'll continue to monitor that as conditions change. We absolutely desire to bring students back in person, but only when it's safe to do so. So more information on that to come. We do have other community forums, particularly geared towards schools, certain school sites later this week. I'd encourage you to participate in those as well. And just know that you're in really good hands. Lara Goldman and Qingfei Hu are just fantastic. I know they're working on all the ins and outs for our students with special needs. And at this point, I'd add Qingfei wants to add anything, otherwise moving forward to start. Thanks again, Gloria.
Thank you, Dan. Qingfei?
I just want to say briefly, we're here to listen. Lara, you're in great hands with Lara. She's got a presentation with a lot of information, and my role here is just to hear what you need so we can make sure we're working it into all of our plans. And I think you'll see that Lara has already considered a lot of different things. We just want to make sure we're covering all of our bases because, as Dan said, we want to get up and running as quickly as we can and to the best of our ability, and we're going to do what we can with the situation that we have.
Thank you both, really appreciate it. So this evening, our meeting is on planning for the upcoming school year, specifically for students with IEPs and 504s. When our schools abruptly closed in March due to the coronavirus, we switched to distant learning without any preparation. And that was really difficult. Now, we appreciate our therapists and our teachers for their efforts and their innovative strategies to support our students. But for some of us, because of the nature and or severity of our kids' disabilities, distance learning was a frustrating experience. Now, we all know that the fall semester is going to start with total distance learning, as Dan mentioned. And I know many of us were worried, which is why I think it's important for us to come together and share our questions and our input, and together give voice to the most vulnerable kids in the district. I know it's no easy task to meet the diverse needs of kids with disabilities, but that has got to be our goal because we don't want to leave any child behind in this pandemic. Now, this evening, I'm very grateful to Special Programs Director Lara Goldman for taking time to join us and answer our questions. Many of you have already submitted your questions and I've shared them with Lara. So with that said, Lara, I'm going to turn the time over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for having me. And it's always a pleasure to meet with our parents and staff. And I really look forward to continuing our partnership this school year. So the agenda, I'll briefly go over the guiding principles for the district, and special programs, of course, is a big part of that. Parent questions, a summary, and throughout the presentation, I plan to answer the questions with the information I'm sharing today. If I don't get to every question, or if I miss a nuance of a question, please do send it to Gloria, and I will get back to you at the end of the presentation or later through email. So after that, we will go over, whoops, sorry about that, IEP meetings and assessments, the CDE and the OCR guidance, services, SB 98, which is a new Senate bill, and emergency plans, which are new, and then the IEP distance plan, which will need to be updated this year, 504 plans in distance learning, and then I have some additional resources. And I will quickly review the full distance and hybrid models. So this presentation flipped as soon as we went back in, or it looked like we were going back into distance learning. I was going to talk more about the hybrid model, but today I will be focusing on distance learning. If we do go back into the hybrid model, then I want to have another meeting with all of you, and we will focus on that more thoroughly than we will today. Right, so the guiding principles of the district are that we will ensure instructional quality, prioritize safety, promote consistency, facilitate open and effective communication, and foster reciprocal accountability. More details about that are here, and they were in the board presentation a couple weeks ago. And I want to just emphasize how important it is to me to communicate with parents, and I always make an effort to get back to you. And if I don't, it means I missed your email, so please send it again. It won't bother me. I really do want to address parent concerns, and that goes for staff as well. Promoting consistency, I think, is an important theme when it comes to distance learning, and it's something that we're working on together as a district, and working to improve distance learning and to streamline and simplify what it looks like from a parent or a student perspective. Okay, parents provided questions to Gloria on these categories. These are more of the distance learning questions, and I just posted on here the link to the FAQs in distance learning on the CDE website that they just posted, I think, on Sunday. And then the hybrid model, there were some questions about that. Okay, I'll begin with initial IEP assessments and meetings. So an initial assessment means an assessment where a student has not yet been receiving special education services. And what happened during the shelter in place is that the timeline was paused. So typically I will get a referral. I have 15 days, or the district has 15 days within which to send out an assessment plan, and or hold an SST meeting and then send an assessment plan. The SST meeting does not delay the assessment plan if that's what the team decides to move forward with. And then after the assessment plan is sent, we have 60 days to complete the assessment once we have a parent signature indicating consent. So this timeline was completely paused. And at this point, it is still completely paused. Here's what, one other thing, I am meeting with my team later this month, and we are going to talk about how we might possibly be able to move forward with some of the initial assessments, but we really do need to work out those details. We were able to complete a few this summer. We did a few in person. We have a whole safety protocol, and I used a contractor who had developed this protocol, and it worked well. We also did a few remote assessments, and every student is not appropriate for, or remote assessment is not appropriate for every student or for every assessment. Okay, annual meetings. Your annual IEP meeting where you update the goals and the present levels and the progress, and you develop new goals. This will be scheduled as usual, and we will complete as much of the annual IEP meeting as we can, or the IEP documents. We will add the emergency contingency plan, which I'll get into a little bit later, and update the distance learning plan. Triennial meetings. So a triennial meeting is an IEP meeting where you reestablish eligibility. So typically we would do a full assessment for these students. So many of the students last year had a part 1 because the requirements to hold the annual and triennial meetings were not paused. We have to hold them on time. So we can either hold them partially and then schedule a part 2 for later. So that was the plan. We thought we'd be back in person and we'd be scheduling part 2. However, that didn't happen. So there are several triennial IEPs out there where they are somewhat in limbo. They have had part 1 of the meeting and they were waiting to do an assessment in person to finish part 2. So we can either continue to delay, we can decide to do the assessment differently. We can decide to meet and add the emergency plan and update the distance learning plan. So that is between you and the case manager to work out. For the assessments that are due this year, we can either, again, we are still working out the details on this, but assess virtually or do an alternative assessment, such as a file review. So if we are if we're able to reestablish eligibility with a file review, then we can do a file review. And that is a review of records, interview of staff, of parents, and other service providers, doctors, if that's applicable. And if the psychologist can establish eligibility with just a file review, then we can consider that. We could do part of an assessment. A lot of the rating scales you can do virtually. You can do parent interviews and staff interviews. We could update the distance learning plan, or we could just completely delay the assessment, open the IEP to make a note of it. And we could still, if we open the IEP meeting, we can document the present levels of performance. We can update some of the goals, maybe all of the goals. We can develop new goals to meet the child's needs. Right, so I wanted to go over the path that we've been on with the different guidance that we are getting. We are primarily getting guidance from the Office of Civil Rights through the U.S. Department of Education, and then of course the California Department of Education. So on this first one, hold on. The OCR in mid-March, and this is again the federal arm, said that if it's feasible during distance learning, services can be provided through alternate or additional methods, meaning we can do services online, we can do them through consultation, we can do them through direct service, or we could do them through indirect service, asynchronous or synchronous lessons as well. The CDE then said that the school must ensure that students with disabilities also have equal access to the same opportunities, including the provision of FAPE, and that the schools must ensure that to the greatest extent possible, each student with a disability can be provided with special ed and related services. Then the CDE said, again, that the educational and support services should be commensurate with those identified in the IEP. Then the OCR said that ensuring compliance should not prevent any school from offering educational programs through distance instruction. This is because there was a widespread concern about should you do special education service online because of all the privacy and the compliance issues. And the OCR issued this guidance on March 21st that said, no, that should not prevent you from providing service to the students. And finally, the OCR said that schools may not be able to provide all of the service in the same manner that they are typically provided. And how FAPE is to be provided may need to be different. So let me just review. The OCR says that if it's feasible, we provide services. We can do this through alternate means. That we should not decide that we shouldn't provide distance learning because we're concerned about compliance, and that we also may not be able to provide all the services, and that FAPE may need to be different. Then the CDE says we must implement the IEP to the greatest extent possible, and the service must be commensurate with those identified in the IEP. So the guidance is slightly different, as you can see, and we must consider all of it when we are making plans for our students. All right, so what did distance learning look like, and what do we foresee it looking like in the future? And before I forget, I wanted to make sure that I answered the question, the person who asked me if a computer would be provided if you don't have one, and yes, we have Chromebooks for students who do not have access to technology. Okay. So during distance learning, we provided service, specialized academic instruction is service provided by an education specialist, such as a teacher in the Learning Center or a resource specialist at Ralston. We provided specialized academic instruction through individual and group live instruction sessions, recorded lessons, consultation with parents, related service providers and teachers, co-taught live instruction classes, and paraeducator support under the supervision of an education specialist. They and the credentialed ed specialist can both provide SAI, or specialized academic instruction. Related services were also provided. We have 3 categories of related services. From a parent-facing perspective, they probably all look like one category. To me, they come from different agencies, or they work directly with us. So district provided services are speech, OT, and behavior. We have our own AAC specialist, we have paraeducators, and we have mental health support and therapists, and we have counselors. The counselors are not an IEP service. I just didn't want to forget to mention that we do still have counselors for distance learning. County provided services include vision, orientation and mobility, adapted physical education, and naturally I forgot one, audiology and DHH, or deaf and hard of hearing teachers. Agency provided services are physical therapy and AT. So district provided related services, individual and group live instruction sessions, recorded lessons. They also made an amazing website, each of the related service providers, and so did our special education teachers. The Learning Center teachers have a website, and so do the SDC teachers, and speech and language, preschool, and OT. They consulted with parents, and they also participated in live instruction with the gen ed, or with the student while they're in their gen ed class, to help to make accommodations for that class, and that's a very important piece. County provided services were provided with individual and group instruction and consult with parents, as you can see, in service providers and teachers, and agency provided services the same way. So before we move on, a note on privacy. BRSSD uses HIPAA and FERPA compliant platforms. such as we have used Zoom, we have used Google Meet. Those are HIPAA and FERPA compliant. We also have a district acceptable use agreement, which you have all signed, or you did last year if you were using our technology. And then this year you will have another opportunity to sign that. And I wanted to point out that it says that because the use of district technology is intended for educational purposes, students shall not have an expectation of privacy. And I put that in there because my service providers are very concerned about privacy and confidentiality. And we want to make sure that we are pointing out to parents that if your child is on a video lesson, that other parents may see them. If they're in a group lesson, for example, another parent might walk by and see your child, or if the teacher is teaching from their home, another person in the house might hear or overhear the lesson, or even walk by the screen. These things happen, and we just want to make sure that everyone is completely clear on this. We have an additional teleservice agreement for related services, and also for SAI. Signing this agreement also confirms that you understand that family members and other students' homes may observe your child. We just want to really make sure we're clear about pointing that out. We provide para support over Zoom. Also, they're always under the supervision of a credentialed staff. Sorry? Okay. We provide para support in Zoom lessons, and they often participate in the lesson and then follow up with the student in a breakout room afterwards under the supervision of our credentialed staff. So I had a couple of questions on data tracking and progress on goals. And there were some goals where we did not collect data that related to the goal. For example, a student with a PT goal of navigating the playground. Well, we did not work on this because the playgrounds were close to schools and the students were at home. So the PT may have consulted with the parent about navigating the play area in the home, or some other access in the home that was relevant to his or her services of physical therapy. So data that matched the goal may not have been collected, but anecdotal data of what was collected, which could be a narrative, was included with the IEP progress updates or progress reports. Same with any of our services. Some of our goals we could work on really well over a video platform, and we were able to do even some reading assessments. We were able to measure progress on a lot of different goals using quantitative data. But when we didn't have quantitative data, we had a lot of qualitative data. And that data can also show progress and have a record of what happened during distance learning and what worked and what did not work. So data is not always collected through direct testing. It can be anecdotal, and it can be based on observation as well. Okay, so now we have SB 98. So SB 98 ensures that if an LEA offers distance learning, it must make sure that students have access to internet connectivity and devices, that they provide quality, challenging content aligned to grade level standards. So this goes along with our goal, which is consistency and high quality instruction. Supports to address the needs of all students, which are students in particular with special needs, special education related services and accommodations required by an IEP, and ELD services and instruction, and daily live interaction with certificated employees and peers. So this is another, just another visual of the different requirements for SB 98. And thank you, Ching-Pei. Ching-Pei made this slide. So SB 98 and how it relates to distance learning, in particular to IEPs. There is a new part to every IEP for the first time, I don't know, ever, which is Part 9, which is that an emergency contingency plan must be added at the next regularly scheduled IEP. The emergency contingency plan must be a description of the means by which the IEP will be provided under emergency conditions, in which the instruction or services or both cannot be provided at the school or in person for more than 10 school days. So the emergency contingency plan could simply be a sentence that says, under emergency conditions, and here are some of the emergency conditions, that services will be provided on a distance learning plan. And it can just be that statement. We are in emergency conditions right now because we have a pandemic. So these emergency this plan must be more detailed because it needs to include how special education and related services will be provided, how supplementary aids and services, in other words, accommodations, will be provided, transition services, that applies to high school only, and extended school year services, how they will be addressed. So I went into my records and I dug up some distance learning plans that we made for last spring, and then I adjusted them to incorporate what we are required to do now under SB 98. So this is a spring, very simple distance learning plan. This student only had speech service. He or she had 20 minutes of individual speech therapy via video conference every other week, and with a 20-minute parent and or teacher consultation. And the frequency and duration was just included in the description. I looked at this student's IEP to see what the supplementary aids and services were on the IEP, and if there was information about extended school year so that I could add it to the revised DLP. So there again is what it looked like last spring. And this year in the fall, I looked at the IEP and it didn't say 20 minutes, it said 3 15-minute individual sessions. So I just changed that to match the IEP. Supplemental aid, and by the way, the service provider made that decision to do 20-minute sessions. She probably had a good reason for that. And so she made that recommendation, and that's why it's on the distance learning plan. I simply changed it because I was making it match. Frequency and duration is listed here. Supplementary aids and services. So this student had an FM system, and I noted that it's not applicable, but the student will still need support. So the student will need headphones and adjust the volume, reduce background noise, and parent consultation. And also you can see the captions running along the screen. So, whoops, sorry. Closed captioning where available could be added to this distance learning plan, and that would also be a supplementary aid and service. Now, in order to provide the support that the classroom teacher or the parent at home might need with the volume and the closed captioning, I put in here 20 minutes of consult per month. So the service provider had recommended 20 minutes of parent consult, and that was specific to the distance learning plan, and so I also added it here. And then ESY, the student had made progress on goals, so there was no regression. ESY, extended school year, is offered when students regress and then over a period of time do not recoup what they have learned within a reasonable period of time. Here is a much more complicated spring distance learning plan. This particular student had speech and language OT and SAI from an ed specialist, and you can see what was offered. 90 minutes per month of online service and consultation. Consultation, by the way, is a support, so it can go into the support part of the plan. Direct OT service and some consultation, and then 90 minutes of online service from the ed specialist and 15 minutes of parent consult, and it was in 3 30-minute video sessions. Well, I looked at this student's IEP, and he had, let's see, he had 90 minutes of speech a month, so I kept that exactly the same. OT, he had, sorry about that, he had the same amount of OT, and then the consultation, I'm putting on the other part of the plan, the new part, the supplementary aids and services part, because the consultation is really the support for the staff that works with the student, and so that could be his teacher and it could be his parent. So that will be video sessions with the parent and student for direct services, and then the consultation. SAI, short synchronous lessons for reading, writing, and math, 3 each per week, and then an at-home learning schedule which would be developed in collaboration with the classroom teacher, and that would be Lexia practice and IXL math. So that would be 9 20-minute lessons per week of online service, 6 in a group and 3 individual. So I saw a lot of individual service on IEPs and for distance learning, and in many cases, individual service does work better and was what was successful. However, the 2 things, the IEPs, many of them said group service, and SB 98 says we must foster peer interaction. And so having a small group is a way of having peer interaction and also more closely matching the IEP. Many of our students have social skills goals, for example, and you would need another student to work on that, or to play a game or practice turn taking or conversation skills. This student, by the way, 9 20-minute lessons on Zoom is a lot of Zoom lessons. When this student was in person, he or she had 300 minutes per week of service, so a lot of service. So yes, 9 times 20, that's a lot of Zoom lessons. It's not the same amount, but remember, as what's on his IEP, the OCR said that we may not be able to watch or meet the offer of FAPE exactly, and that distance learning will look different, and all services will not be provided exactly as they would be in person. It just doesn't work that way. But we can do what we need to do to make it work. So this student also had SKIA support in the classroom. So I added some information for how the SKIA can support the student in distance learning. So and again, I'm just making this up. I'm not part of the student's IEP team. And if there's a staff member out there who recognizes this, I'm not making a recommendation. That needs to come from you. If you like these ideas, great, but you know the student better than I do. So I said that the SKIA should join the student for classroom instruction on video, and then follow up in a breakout session for support with students and do daily organization support with the student's Google Drive. So I looked at the student's IEP, and he or she had folders that were supposed to be organized with the help of the SKIA. That was specifically listed. So I thought, well, Google has folders, and wouldn't it be great? I would love this. Someone would help the student to organize the folders and color code them. So I put 120 minutes per day. The student had 180 minutes per day of SKIA support. So again, the IEPs are not going to look minute per minute exactly the same, or the DLPs are not going to look minute for minute exactly the same as an IEP offer of FAPE. This is a lot of online time, and maybe I overshot it too with 120 minutes. It will have to be scheduled and overseen by the teacher, by a credentialed staff member. So a lot of our specialists have an extra Chromebook at home so that they could monitor paras working with students. But it's a lot of scheduling, and it's a lot of monitoring, and it's a lot of planning, and it won't be implemented immediately in the beginning of school. It's just not possible. Plus, we need to make changes that are relevant for this year. So accommodations and supports were added, and you can see I won't go over them in detail, but I put consult minutes of 200 minutes per year for the parent and staff, so that the service could be weighted towards the beginning of the year to really support getting the student set up for success in the beginning of the school year. And again, this student didn't qualify for ESY. 504 plans, just to review, a 504, you are eligible for a 504 if you have a disability, a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities, a record of having such an impairment, or if you are regarded as having such an impairment. It must impact your access to education and require accommodations. The accommodations back when we were in school were in the classroom for the most part. There were some homework accommodations or parent accommodations, but mostly in the classroom. And then now we are in distance learning. So I looked at a 504 plan, actually a bunch of these. So this is not one 504 plan. Each row is an accommodation, and but they're from lots of different students. So a student who is easily distracted in class, for example, their classroom accommodations were preferential seating, noise canceling headphones to be worn at the student's discretion. But now the student is at home. So the student is distracted, not in class, but by noise in the home. So the adjustment to the accommodation for distance learning was to provide a headset that directly connects to the computer and or noise canceling headphones. Another 504 reason you might have a 504 is you have a peanut allergy. Well, in the classroom, EpiPen also in the office, personal placement for placemat for lunch. But during distance learning, this parent knows not to have peanuts for the child, so there wasn't a change to the 504. A student with dysregulation issues, front loading was what was for, and you can see the daily schedule and visuals were for the classroom accommodations. So, sorry, my mouse is super sensitive. The daily schedule, though, I imagined might not be visible. It's really hard to toggle between screens. So even if the teacher had emailed the daily schedule, the student might not be able to toggle between the Zoom screen and the daily schedule to know what to expect, or between, look at the daily schedule and then do his independent work. So I put here that the teacher would email the weekly or daily schedule, and the parents would print it out and make sure it's next to the child, because the child really needs the schedule. And then I won't go over all of these in great detail, but just again, this is what was provided in the classroom. I will call on this one though. Anxiety, a child who has anxiety, not to call on the student, not to cold call on the student, was in the 504 plan. However, I imagined, and I was actually talking with a parent about this, that being on video made the student feel uncomfortable. So an easy accommodation would be able to have the student allowed to turn off the video during lessons so that the student doesn't feel like they're on display. And then the teacher would still not cold call on the student, but might type a question in the chat, and then the parent or the student could answer privately in the chat. All right, and then one of you had asked me for a list of accommodations. So these are from the Quality Matters Accessibility and Usability Resource site. There are a lot more details on the site. This is just a list, but there are details about what they are and how they might look, if you want to look at that. Right. In addition to what we had last year, we have, and again, I mentioned the fabulous web pages that my staff made that's up on the BRSSD website. And we ordered Learning Ally, which is curriculum aligned text and a really huge fiction library, human read books, and it is for students with a documented disability. And we have plenty of licenses, and if you don't need audio texts typically, but you need them now, let your case manager know so we can get Learning Ally for them. Read Live, it is a research proven reading intervention strategy to it's an effective tool that individualizes instruction and improves reading fluency. So we have that for all of the education specialists. Lexia, we continue to have. That is an intervention. It's available to gen ed students and special students who receive special education services. And you can make an individualized plan based on the students' deficits that show up in the assessment. Lindamood Bell, I'm meeting together with one of the education specialists and the Lindamood Bell rep later this week to find out what they have for online, not only training, but also materials that we can use online. And this is a multisensory approach for teaching reading, in particular to students with dyslexia, but it works for other students too. And then iReady Math, which is an online program that provides students with differentiated instruction and supports. Okay, so now I have to think, okay, what are we going to do in the beginning of the year? My child has a 504 plan, or my child has an IEP, and it needs to be updated. So you are always entitled to have an IEP meeting. We have 30 days to provide an IEP meeting to you. If you request an IEP meeting, we will provide it. However, it will be a lot faster to adjust the DLP if you work with your case manager over the phone, over a video check-in, through email, sending drafts back and forth. And if you can do that outside of an IEP meeting, it will be faster. So at the next, and SB 98 does not say we're required to have an IEP meeting for this right now. We are required to add the emergency plan at the next regularly scheduled IEP meeting. So the next annual or the next try. And the DLP really may need to evolve between now and then. So if you keep having IEP meetings to change the DLP, then you can do that. But you will have a lot of IEP meetings between now and your next regularly scheduled IEP, and it will just be a little bit more cumbersome. It's going to be faster, and you will be able to make adjustments faster if you just collaborate with your case manager to do these adjustments. Now for 504 plans, the principal at the elementary sites oversees these. Nesbitt has a principal and so does Sandpiper, a principal and an assistant principal. And then at Ralston, it is the counselors that oversee these. So if you need adjustments to the 504 plan, you need to contact one of them. I had a question about how does the school know about the 504? I'm transitioning to Ralston. So at the end of last year, we held 504 meetings with Ralston for the incoming sixth graders. So let the principal know, because the counselors are not back yet, but let the principal or the assistant principals know if you didn't have that. And then I had a question about if you moved in from out of state, how do we know about your IEP? Well, when you register, you check that you have an IEP, but then you need to provide it to us, and we will provide an administrative placement that is our best guess about what what services we have that best match your IEP, your student's IEP, and then we'll develop a distance learning plan together with you. We almost always call the parents when we get a transfer student. We don't get that many, so it's easy to provide that personalized service. So we'll just call you and we'll discuss it with you. But we need to know who you are, and you need to send us a copy of the IEP. Okay, instructional design. The continuum of service, this is from the board presentation. So of course our goal is to get to full traditional learning. We are unfortunately over in the pink area and we're having full distance learning. Throughout the year, we may be able to, if it's safe, remember safety is our #1 priority. We have to be safe if we are coming back. We will have dual pathway. Will have distance learning or hybrid learning. I had some questions about the students with moderate to severe needs and would they be on an AB schedule. So I've been working together with the special day class teachers to really plan for how we can best meet those students' needs, and we would want them back as many days per week as we could. And we have made adjustments in our drafts of what their schedules would look like to emphasize safety. Okay. Again, just another review, the live pupil teacher and peer-to-peer instruction is maximized and all students are participating. These are some characteristics of distance learning, which I just put there for your information. This is from the board presentation. And then these are the hybrid plans. I had some questions about how service is offered if we're in person on an AV schedule. Most of the service would be provided on your opposite day. So if you're at school on an A day, you would have your service, most of it on your B day, and it would mostly be remote. Our service providers have multiple students from multiple cohorts of students on their caseload. So they cannot be the conduit that connects various cohorts of students. So we do have some flexibility, and we're working, again, I'm meeting with my staff next week to talk about how assessment might look. And what would be safe to do in person, and what can we do remotely. The framework and also the pandemic recovery framework, and also the Stronger Together guidance from the state does allow some flexibility. Now, some of you have asked me about a waiver so that we can bring students, especially students with moderate to severe disabilities, back even sooner. And there was a waiver on the CDE website, and then there wasn't because they took it down. So I don't know what's going on with the waiver, but the waiver, when it was on the website, did require collaboration from all the stakeholder groups. So community needed to give input. The staff needs to give input, and everyone has to be in support of the plan for the waiver to be accepted. So again, I don't know what is happening right now with the waiver. I'm checking every day to see what's going on with the waiver. So I'll keep you updated as I learn about that, but it's not going to be a fast process. I think once we get the waiver turned in, I think it will be quick, but I think that, you know, figuring out exactly what we can do under the conditions, current conditions or any future conditions, that's going to be much harder to work out. So again, I will keep you updated. Our goal with the hybrid learning was to have consistency across all models. So distance learning in this plan was also going to be on an A or B day, but because we're all in distance learning, we're not in A and B. Distance learning A and B mirrors in-person A and B. So everyone gets 2 days 1 week and 3 the next. Right, and that is the end.
Great, thank you so much, Lara. Well, we have a lot of questions, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. Starting with a few parents have questions about assessments, initial assessments. So are all initial assessments on hold? Or I remember when we talked over the weekend, Lara, you had mentioned that referrals from GGRC, are those on hold or are those on schedule?
No. So here's the thing. Assessments are on hold, but with GGRC, that's the Part C to B timeline. That's a federal timeline, and we have to meet it. So we are dealing with those cases on a case-by-case basis. And at first, when we went into shelter in place, GGRC was allowed to, and they still are allowed to, continue the service that they were providing. But then, and they did that at first, and then they didn't. So now we need to meet with those families individually and figure out what to do to address the need to move from Part C to B services in a way that works for the family, and that because we're all in distance right now, and distance for 3-year-olds, I mean, that's what the Part C to B kids are. They're 3.
Yeah.
So the family and the school may decide that this is not really the best offer, but that's what we have right now. So case by case. We did fit in a couple of preschoolers for assessments this summer.
Okay. Now, how about if a family had already gotten assessed by a private evaluator? Can they use that assessment to get services?
They can share the assessment with us, and we can consider it. We are required to do our own assessment as well. So again, case by case basis, and they should share that with us and determination. But we have to do our own assessment. We can't only rely on an outside provider.
Now, we have also a number of questions here about paraeducators. So families are wondering, their child has a para at school. Now that they're doing distance learning, over the spring semester, maybe the para was kind of doing some video work with the child, but parents are really wanting the para to maybe come to the home for support. Now that we're not sheltering in place, is that a possibility?
Not at this time. We cannot send staff into the homes. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Now, along those lines, when I look at the list of questions submitted, a lot of parents are concerned that this video format doesn't work very well for their child with disability. Any possibility of an in-person type of maybe an after-school group on campus in an outdoor space, is that possible? I mean, as you can imagine, for some kids, Zoom lessons is just not the best format. What is your advice to the parent out there? Their child is really having a hard time with these Zoom lessons and Zoom therapies.
Well, I'd say the first thing I would do is talk to the case manager and see if we can adjust the DLP. A lot of the recommendations for students with moderate to severe disabilities is to work within the family schedule and to make a matrix of activities that happen during the day and how the goals might be addressed through that matrix. And then sending materials home. Our staff loves to make materials, and we have paraeducators who can support with that because they're home now too. So materials that can go home for activities for them to work on. In terms of an after-school plan, I mean, that's an interesting question. I will get back to you. Right now, all of our teachers are not coming to school because we are doing distance learning. The schools are not closed, though, to the teachers. They're allowed to be in the school to do work. But in terms of meeting with students, right now, our teachers are not meeting with students. So no. The waiver, I don't know what's going to happen with this waiver. So that could change things.
I just got a message from someone saying that there's more clarification on the waiver from the county office. So maybe we'll find out more.
Yeah, I was supposed to get that email today, and as of 6 o'clock, I didn't have it. So
yeah, hopefully good news.
Yeah, forward that to me. I would love to read it.
Okay. Now, this parent would like to know, do we need to renew the 504 plan every year? Is that something that needs to be done, or is it once in place, it just kind of keeps going year to year?
Yeah, it should be renewed every year. And anytime it's not the way, if it's not supporting the student, then you should revisit it. Call the counselor, call the principal, call the assistant principal, and make revisions. So revisions are, I mean, for DLP, for distance learning, the accommodations would probably be different for a lot of kids with 504 plans. It's a different environment, so there may need to be adjustments. Again, if you can work this out with your student's teacher or counselor, and instead of calling a whole meeting with everybody on the team, we'll just make it go faster. But
so your advice is for the parent to email the case manager or the principal in this case,
yeah,
with the 504 plans and try to make adjustments over email. Is there something for the parent to sign?
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's the same 504 plan with the update. So, I mean, the principal, if I were the principal, I'd probably say this: let's wait and see how it goes the first 2 weeks so we know where the issues are this year, because we don't, and there's a new teacher, and there's, so things may be different than they were at the end of last year. And so the problems may be different, or maybe they would be solved.
Yeah.
So you may not need to make adjustments. So I would give it a couple of weeks.
Okay. Now, I remember looking at the list of questions submitted, a parent had asked about social skills. For a lot of kids, you know, social skill deficit is part of their disability. They have social skills goal in their IEPs. Are we still going to be able to work on those social skills in a distance learning model?
Well, like with everything, I mean, it depends. It depends on the goal and how the student's able to work online with the service provider. That's one way of meeting the goal, or the goal could be met through consultation with the parent about what to do with the child at home. We are going to be trying to do more group service. As you can imagine, just think mathematically, if you're an ed specialist and you have 25 students on your caseload, everyone has individual service, your entire week of work is finished after 1 hour of service for each of your students. You have no more time left. And that doesn't even count the IEP meetings or the consultation with gen ed teachers or consultation with parents. So it's just not mathematically possible to do all individual service for in most cases. So anyway, group service is a great way to work on social skills. You need other kids to be social with. And then for all students, there's social emotional learning. There's a whole plan for addressing that in the classroom, delivering lessons. And the teachers are well aware that our students are going to need support in this area. They're going to need the connection. This is a super traumatic event that we're all going through. And we need to spend time, all teachers will be spending time helping their kids through this, and helping to, you know, to listen to them, what their fears are, what their concerns are, what they're missing, and try to make that connection and give them some normalcy again.
Yeah, that's going to be much needed. And along those lines, parents have asked about counseling for their kids, and I'm sure that will be available when school starts in August.
Yeah, we still have our school counselors. We still have our mental health therapists for students with that IEP service. And again, everyone will get the social emotional learning lessons in the classroom.
Great. Now we have a parent here. She has an incoming 6th grader to Ralston. And one of the electives recommended was the study skills class. Wondering if that would still be provided in distance learning.
Yeah, Chuck, I mean, can you confirm that? I don't think we have any plans not to have the study skills class. Unless you're talking about directed studies. I mean, we're definitely planning on having directed studies. But the other class, the study skills class.
I can't unmute myself.
Oh, you did.
There,
Oh,
we can hear
I guess
you.
I can unmute myself. Yeah, so as far as I know, we are still planning to offer study skills, or as far as like developing the class for executive functioning skills, we're looking at addressing that. I just want to make sure study skills is not directed studies, and I was fumbling with the mute. Are those two separate things?
Yeah, they are. They are two separate things.
I just want to clarify that. So yeah, as far as and again, those go versus their specialized support, which would be through the IEP, and study skills is typically a non-IEP associated class. So just to make that clarification. So that's a more regular ed support that we provide.
And we are still working out the details of the Ralston schedule and exactly what that's going to look like.
And if I could just jump in on that, this is a very comprehensive thing. I'm an incoming parent to the district as well as being a teacher at Ralston, and I know some of you guys from the transition meetings or from previous years. Everything that Ms. Goldman was saying is really helpful. It's good information. One thing that I just wanted to put out there for all of the parents so that she doesn't get flooded with an avalanche of calls, is that so much of what's happening is still being negotiated between the union and the district. And so a lot of the finer details of this and the way it plays out are subject to those kind of change. So she's giving you the best information she has at hand right now, the most educated, and insightful perception she can of how everything can and should be to the best of our abilities. But when all is said and done, part of that is going to be dependent on those union negotiations. So please, I know that as parents who have kids with IEPs, you've been through so much, especially lately, and you've had to work so hard, and there's this sense of always needing to fight for your kids. I can only speak for myself and the teachers that I've worked with and the admin that I've worked with, but we've been working desperately to try and make sure that we can be these best teachers possible and implement these IEPs for your students. And so if we could ask for just a little bit of that faith from you guys, especially as those negotiations continue, if there's any small changes to how this presentation looks or anything, things like how, classes will be given and all, it is all in good faith. I desperately want to make solid connections with my students this year and have great classroom experiences with them, whether it's online or not. And so just please, we're asking for patience and understanding, because it's going to take a lot of adjustments to really make this work and to improve on everything we learned from the spring. So thank you for hearing me out about that.
Thank you. Now we have a few more questions about Ralston. For this parent, her child was pulled out for reading and writing, and he has an IEP. So will he get pulled out during regular class time to a virtual learning center, Lara?
Is this a student who has like RSP ELA on their schedule? If it is,
I imagine it's RSP, yeah.
Yeah, they'll go to their RSP ELA class, however that's scheduled. So they won't miss their ELA class. The RSP ELA class will be their ELA class.
Okay.
We don't actually do the pull-out models at Ralston. It's just since we have the bell period, if you have English language support for your specialized academic instruction minutes, that is your English class.
Okay. A couple of parents are wondering about the Ralston schedule, if the schedule is still the same as was on the board presentation. Lara, are you aware, or Chuck, are you aware of any changes to that proposed schedule?
That was one possible draft, and we are still working on it. That was one idea of how it could look. It's still being worked out.
Okay. And parents will receive detailed assignment of class schedules probably within the next few weeks after the information update process, I imagine. Parents are wanting to get a detailed schedule for their child.
We will do the best we can to provide a schedule. It will be provided before the beginning of school, but as you heard throughout the presentation, there's still some things being worked out. And so we don't want to send a schedule and then have to send revisions, and then that's going to drive everyone crazy. So we want to send it out one time.
Okay. Now maybe we will end with this one last question here. I know we have not gotten to all the questions, but a lot of them are quite similar. So hopefully tonight we've covered the majority of the issues. This one last question for our youngest students, the preschool students. Parent is wondering, what will preschool look like?
It's distance learning. So the preschool staff and I've been meeting with each of the different groups of service providers, so the Learning Center teachers and the SDC teachers and the preschool teachers in particular. And we have been working, throughout the summer, working on really finalizing what the hybrid model would have looked like, and now the distance learning. So we need to work out that schedule.
Great. So, well, thank you very much, Lara, for your presentation and your time. We're really appreciative. To the educators out there in the audience, if you have any resources to share with us when it comes to remote learning, what kind of accommodation may work, please do send me a message. I'd love to share that with our audience. Thank you, Dan and Cheng Pei, for taking time to join us this evening. And I just want to say that, I know this upcoming school year is going to be unlike any other, but we'll get through it together, so you're not alone. Well, thank you all, and have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
Thank you.